The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Maria wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. The kitchen was already hot, the old ceiling fans doing little to push away the thick air that clung to everything. She stood over 3 massive pots, stirring each one with the practiced rhythm of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Rice in one, beans in another, a simple stew in the third, nothing fancy, nothing that would make anyone remember her name. Around her, the other kitchen staff moved like shadows. Rosa chopped vegetables with quick, precise cuts. Miguel hauled sacks of potatoes from the storage room, his back bent under the weight. They barely spoke to each other anymore. What was there to say? Every day was the same. Wake up before dawn. Cook for 300 soldiers. Clean, sleep, repeat. Maria had been cooking at the military base for 7 years now. 7 years of being invisible. 7 years of watching young soldiers come and go, their faces changing but their attitudes staying the same. To them, she was just the cook, just the woman who filled their plates, just another face they would forget the moment they left this place. She remembered her first week here. She had been so proud, wearing her clean white apron, thinking she was serving her country in her own way. Her son, Carlos, had joined the army 2 years before that. He had been so handsome in his uniform, standing tall, chest puffed out with pride. Maria had wanted to be close to that world, to understand what her boy was living through. So when the base opened positions for kitchen staff, she applied immediately. But the reality was different from what she had imagined. The soldiers barely looked at her. When they did, it was with impatience, annoyance if their food was not ready exactly on time. She heard their jokes sometimes when they thought she could not hear. Jokes about the bland food, jokes about her age, jokes about how anyone could do what she did. Last month had been the worst. A group of new recruits had come through the serving line, young men barely 20 years old. One of them, a boy with red hair and freckles covering his nose, had looked at her meal and wrinkled his face in disgust. "This is what we're supposed to eat," he had said to his friend, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My grandmother cooks better than this, and she's been dead for 5 years." His friends had laughed. Even some of the older soldiers had smiled. Maria had kept her face blank, her hands steady as she served the next person in line. But inside, something had cracked. She had gone home that night and cried for the first time in years, not because of the insult to her cooking, but because she realized that after all this time, after all her hard work, she was still nobody to these people. Her supervisor, a harsh woman named Lieutenant Vasquez, did not make things easier. Vasquez had never been in combat. She had spent her entire military career behind a desk, pushing papers and barking orders at people like Maria. She treated the kitchen staff like they were prisoners, not employees. "The rice is too soft," Vasquez would say, poking at the food with a fork like it might bite her back. "The soldiers need firm rice, rice with texture. Can't you get anything right?" The next day, Maria would make the rice firmer. "What is this?" Vasquez would snap. "The rice is hard as rocks. Are you trying to break their teeth? Do better." There was no winning, no pleasing her. No amount of effort that would make Vasquez see Maria as anything more than a failure waiting to happen. But Maria kept working. She had to. The money was not much, but it was steady. Her husband had died 8 years ago, leaving her with nothing but debts and an old house that was falling apart piece by piece. Carlos sent money when he could, but he had his own life now, his own family to think about. The base job was all she had. So she stirred the pots. She chopped the vegetables. She scrubbed the floors until her knees ached and her hands were raw, and she stayed invisible. The base itself sat on the edge of the jungle, a collection of buildings surrounded by high fences and guard towers. It was a strategic location, though Maria had never understood exactly why. Something about protecting supply routes. Something about watching the border. The details did not matter to her. She just knew that soldiers came and went, helicopters landed and took off, and trucks rumbled through the gates at all hours. Most of the soldiers stationed here were young. Too young, Maria often thought, Boys pretending to be men, carrying guns that seemed too big for their thin shoulders. They talked tough, swaggered through the mess hall like they owned the world. But Maria saw through it. She saw the fear in their eyes when alarms went off during drills. She saw how their hands shook when news came of attacks in other regions. She wanted to mother them sometimes, to tell them to eat more, to rest, to write letters home to their families, but they would not have listened. She was just the cook. There was one soldier who was different. His name was Sergeant Torres, a man in his 40s with gray streaks in his black hair and eyes that had seen too much. He always said thank you when she served him, always made eye contact. Sometimes, when the mess hall was quiet, he would linger at her station and make small talk. "My mother used to make beans like this," he had told her once, his voice soft with memory. She would cook them all day, adding spices bit by bit until they were perfect. Maria had smiled at that. A real smile, not the polite one she wore like a mask. "Your mother taught you well," Torres had continued. "Not everyone appreciates good food, but those of us who know, we know." It was a small thing, but it had stayed with her. On the hardest days when Vasquez screamed and the soldiers complained and her feet hurt so badly she wanted to cry, she would remember Torres' words. Someone saw her. Someone knew. But Torres had been transferred 3 months ago. Since then, there was nobody, just the work, just the endless, invisible work. The base had been unusually tense for the past few weeks. Maria noticed things, even if nobody thought she did. She noticed the extra guards at the gates. She noticed the officers huddled in urgent conversations. She noticed how the younger soldiers seemed jumpier, their laughter a little too loud, a little too forced. Rosa had mentioned something about rebel activity in the area, groups that wanted to overthrow the government, groups that attacked military targets, but it all felt distant to Maria, abstract, like something that happened on television, not in real life. She finished stirring the stew and called for Miguel to help her move the pots to the serving area. The breakfast shift would start soon. 300 hungry soldiers would file through, grabbing their trays, piling on food, barely looking at the people who had prepared it. Maria tied her hair back tighter and wiped down the serving counter. She checked the serving spoons, making sure each one was clean and in its proper place. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be ready. Outside, she could hear the morning bugle call, the sound of boots on concrete as soldiers jogged past in formation, the distant rumble of a supply truck arriving at the gate, all the familiar sounds of base life. She did not know that this would be the last normal morning. She did not know that by sunset, everything would change. She did not know that the skills she had buried deep inside herself, skills from a life she had left behind long ago, would surface again. She did not know that today, people would stop laughing. Maria took her position behind the serving counter, ladle in hand, and waited for the doors to open. Just another day, just another invisible morning. She was ready to serve. She had no idea she would soon be ready to fight. The explosion hit at 2:15 in the afternoon, right when Maria was preparing vegetables for dinner. The first sound was distant, a dull thump that made the windows rattle. Maria paused, knife in hand, and looked up. Around her, the other kitchen staff stopped what they were doing. Rosa's eyes went wide. Miguel dropped the pot he was carrying and it clattered across the floor. Then came the second explosion, closer this time, much closer. The entire building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling in little clouds. The lights flickered, went out, then came back on with an angry buzz. Maria's heart started pounding. She had heard explosions before during training drills, but those had been scheduled, expected. This was different. This felt wrong. The alarm siren started wailing, not the practice alarm that rang every Tuesday at noon. This was the real one, the sound that meant danger, the sound that meant take cover, the sound that meant the base was under attack. "Everyone down." Lieutenant Vasquez burst through the kitchen door, her face pale and tight with fear. Get to the shelter, now, move. The kitchen staff scrambled. Rosa grabbed her purse. Miguel ran for the back door. Another cook, an older man named Pedro, stood frozen in place, his mouth hanging open. Maria's training kicked in automatically. She turned off the gas burners, one by one, even as her hands shook. Fire was dangerous, more dangerous than whatever was happening outside. Another explosion rocked the building. This one sounded like it came from the motor pool on the east side of the base. Maria heard glass shattering somewhere, heard shouting, heard the rapid crack 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 of gunfire. Gunfire, real gunfire, not practice rounds on the shooting range. Real bullets being fired by real people trying to kill other real people. Maria, come on. Rosa grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the shelter. They ran through the narrow hallway, their shoes slapping against the concrete floor. Other people were running too. Clerks from the administrative offices, mechanics with grease-stained hands, medical staff in their white coats. The shelter was underground, built during the base's construction 20 years ago. Maria had been down there exactly once during her first week, when they did the safety orientation. It was a concrete bunker with metal benches along the walls and a heavy blast door that sealed shut like a bank vault. They poured inside, 30 people, 40, 50. Bodies pressed together in the dim emergency lighting. The smell of fear was thick, sweat and breath and something sharp like metal. Maria found a spot against the wall and slid down until she was sitting on the cold floor. Rosa sat beside her, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. The blast door swung shut with a boom that made everyone jump. They were sealed in now, safe, trapped, both things at once. "What's happening?" someone whispered. "Who's attacking us?" Nobody answered, nobody knew. Maria closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. Her mind went to Carlos. Was he safe? He was stationed 200 miles away at a base near the coast. He should be fine. He had to be fine. She would not let herself think otherwise. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt strange in the shelter, stretched out and compressed at the same time. The sounds from outside were muffled but constant. Explosions, gunfire, shouting. Once, something hit the building directly above them, and the whole shelter shook so hard that dust rained down from the ceiling. A young soldier sat across from Maria. He could not have been more than 19. His name tag said Martinez. His face was gray with terror, and tears ran down his cheeks even though he was trying hard not to cry. He was not armed, just a kid in an army uniform, shaking like a leaf in a storm. Maria wanted to comfort him, to say something that would make him feel better, but what could she say? She was just as scared as he was. Lieutenant Vasquez paced back and forth in the small space, her boots clicking on the concrete. She kept checking her watch, kept muttering to herself. Every few minutes she would try her radio, but all that came back was static. "The communications tower must be down," she said to nobody in particular. "We're cut off." That made the fear worse. Being cut off meant they did not know what was happening, did not know if help was coming, did not know if they would ever get out of this shelter alive. An hour passed. The sounds outside started to change. Less gunfire, more shouting. Voices yelling in a language Maria did not recognize, not Spanish, not English, something else. "They're inside the base," someone whispered. "The enemy is inside." Panic rippled through the shelter like a wave. People started crying, started praying. A woman in a medical uniform hyperventilated so badly that a nurse had to help her breathe into a paper bag. Maria felt something cold settle in her chest. Fear, yes, but something else too. Something she had not felt in a very long time, a kind of clarity, a kind of focus. She thought about her life, about the 7 years she had spent being invisible, being nobody, being just the cook. She thought about all the insults she had swallowed, all the disrespect she had endured, all the times she had made herself small to avoid trouble. And she thought about before, about who she had been before she became the cook, about the skills she had learned, about the person she used to be. Nobody here knew. She had never told them. It had not seemed important. Just another piece of her past, buried and forgotten like so many other things. But maybe it was important now. Maybe it was the most important thing in the world. The shooting outside had stopped completely. The silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. In the silence, they could hear footsteps, boots on concrete, getting closer, multiple people moving through the building above them. "They're searching the base," Vasquez whispered, her voice tight, "looking for survivors." The footsteps stopped right above the shelter. Maria heard voices, harsh, commanding voices, heard metal scraping against metal, heard something that sounded like equipment being set up. "They found the shelter door," someone said. "Oh God, they found us." The people in the shelter pressed back against the walls, as if they could somehow melt into the concrete and disappear. Martinez, the young soldier, was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Rosa grabbed Maria's hand and squeezed so tight it hurt. There was a sound like drilling, metal on metal. They were trying to open the blast door. Vasquez pulled out her sidearm, a small pistol she wore on her belt. Her hands were shaking. "If they get through," she said, her voice cracking, "if they get through, I'll try to hold them off. The rest of you run, find somewhere to hide." It was a brave thing to say. But Maria could see the truth in Vasquez's eyes. She was terrified. She had never been in real combat, had never fired her weapon at another human being. If those doors opened, she would die, and everyone else in the shelter would die right after her. The drilling sound got louder, closer. They were making progress. Maria stood up. Her legs felt steady, stronger than they had in years. She walked over to Vasquez, moving through the crowd of frightened people like she was the only calm person in a storm. "Give me the gun," Maria said quietly. Vasquez stared at her. "What?" "Give me your gun," Maria repeated, "and any extra ammunition you have." "You're the cook," Vasquez said, but her voice was uncertain now. "You can't euros." "I was not always a cook," Maria said, and for the first time in 7 years she let the truth show in her eyes, let the person she used to be rise to the surface. "I was a soldier once, a long time ago, before you were even born. Give me the gun." Vasquez looked at her, really looked at her, saw something there that made her hand move automatically to her belt, unhooking the holster, passing the pistol over along with 2 spare magazines. Maria checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, ejected the magazine, counted the rounds, slammed it back in, racked the slide. The motions came back to her like muscle memory, like she had never stopped. Around her, people stared. This was not the cook they knew. This was someone else. Someone who moved with confidence. Someone who looked at the blast door like she was ready to defend it with her life. "Anyone else armed?" Maria asked the room. Martinez raised his hand slowly. "I have a rifle," he said, his voice small, "in my locker in the barracks." "Then we will have to make do with what we have," Maria said. She looked at the people pressed against the walls, all these scared, helpless people, people who had dismissed her, who had laughed at her, who had treated her like she was nothing. But she would protect them anyway, because that was who she was, who she had always been, underneath the apron and the serving spoons. The drilling sound stopped. There was a moment of terrible silence, then voices outside discussing something in that foreign language, then footsteps walking away. Everyone in the shelter held their breath. Were they leaving? Had they given up? No, they were getting something to blow the door open. Maria positioned herself facing the blast door, pistol raised, feet planted in a shooter's stance. Whatever came through that door, she would be ready. The cook was gone. The soldier had returned. The explosion that tore through the blast door was smaller than Maria expected. Not the massive boom that would have collapsed the ceiling, just a sharp crack followed by the screech of metal tearing. They had used a shaped charge, precise, professional. These were not random attackers. These were trained soldiers. The door buckled inward, creating a gap about 2 feet wide. Smoke poured through the opening, thick and gray. Through the smoke, Maria could see shadows moving, 3 of them, maybe 4, carrying rifles, moving cautiously. "Stay down," Maria shouted to the people behind her, everyone against the back wall. The first attacker came through the gap sideways, his rifle leading. He was dressed in dark green combat fatigues with no insignia. His face was covered with a black cloth, only his eyes visible. Those eyes swept the room, looking for targets. Maria fired twice, center mass, just like she had been trained 30 years ago. The man dropped without a sound. The shelter erupted in screams. People who had never seen violence outside of movies were now watching a man die 3 feet away from them, but Maria's mind was cold, calm, focused. This was survival. This was war. There was no room for hesitation. 2 more attackers pushed through the gap, firing blindly into the shelter. Bullets sparked off the concrete walls. Someone screamed. Maria dove to the side, rolled, came up firing. She hit the second attacker in the shoulder. He spun and fell back through the door. The third attacker was smarter. He used the smoke as cover, staying low, moving fast. Maria tracked him with her pistol but could not get a clean shot. He was heading for the civilians pressed against the back wall. Martinez, the young soldier, suddenly lunged forward. He had found something, a metal pipe from somewhere, and he swung it like a baseball bat. It connected with the attacker's rifle, knocking it from his hands. The man turned, pulling a knife from his belt. Martinez froze, terror locking his muscles. Maria put 2 rounds into the attacker's back. He fell forward, the knife clattering from his fingers. For a moment everything was still. The smoke drifted. The bodies lay where they had fallen. Maria's ears rang from the gunfire in the enclosed space. Her hands were steady on the pistol, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Is anyone hit?" she called out. A man near the back raised his hand. "My leg," he gasped. "I think I'm hit." The nurse who had been helping the hyperventilating woman crawled over to him, checking the wound. "It's a graze," she said, her voice shaking. "He'll be okay." Maria moved to the damaged door, keeping her pistol raised. She could hear voices outside, angry voices, shouting. The attackers knew their people were down. They would be coming back, and next time they would not be so cautious. "We cannot stay here," Maria said. "This shelter is a trap now. They will bring explosives, bring more men. We need to move." "Move where?" Vasquez demanded. She looked like she was in shock, staring at the bodies on the floor. "Out there, into the base. It's a war zone." "Better than waiting here to die," Maria said flatly. She picked up one of the fallen rifles, checked it, slung it over her shoulder, grabbed extra magazines from the dead men's gear. "We head for the armory, get more weapons. Then we fight our way to the motor pool and try to get vehicles out of here." "You're insane," someone said. "We're kitchen staff, office workers, we're not soldiers." Maria looked at them, really looked at them, scared faces, helpless faces, people who had spent their lives behind desks and stoves, never imagining they would have to fight. "You are right," she said quietly. "You are not soldiers, but you are alive, and if you want to stay alive, you will follow me, or you can stay here and wait for them to come back." Nobody moved. They were too scared, too overwhelmed. Then Martinez stood up. His face was still pale, but there was something new in his eyes, something hard. "I will go with you," he said. "Tell me what to do." A woman from the medical staff stood up next. "I will come too. They will need a medic." One by one, others started to stand. Not all of them. Some were too injured, some too terrified. But 10 people rose to their feet, ready to follow the cook who was not really a cook. Rosa grabbed Maria's arm. "You never told me," she whispered. "All these years, you never said you were a soldier." "It was a long time ago," Maria said. "Another life." "What unit?" Rosa asked. "What did you do?" Maria met her eyes. Special operations, counterinsurgency. I did things I am not proud of, things I tried to forget, but today those things might keep us alive. She moved to the door, gesturing for the group to follow. Stay close. Stay quiet. If I say stop, you stop. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide without question. Understand? They nodded. Maria could see the doubt in their faces. They were following her because they had no other choice, because she was the only one who seemed to know what she was doing. She hoped she could live up to that trust. The hallway outside the shelter was a disaster. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, soldiers and attackers mixed together in death. Shell casings covered the concrete like brass confetti. The walls were pocked with bullet holes, and smoke hung in the air, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Maria led them forward, rifle up, scanning every corner. The group moved behind her in a tight cluster, trying to step over the bodies without looking at them too closely. They could hear fighting in the distance, the sharp crack of rifles, the deeper boom of grenades. The base was still contested. The attackers had not won yet. That meant there were still friendly forces holding out somewhere. Maria's mind worked through the layout of the base. The armory was in the main administrative building, 200 yards across open ground. Getting there would be suicide, but there was another option. The training facility on the south side had a supply room with basic weapons. It was closer, more protected. She changed direction, leading the group through a side corridor that connected to the training wing. As they moved, she explained the plan in a whisper. We get to the supply room, arm everyone who can shoot. Then we find other survivors and link up with any remaining defense forces. Our goal is to hold until reinforcements arrive from the regional command. They will have heard the attack. Help will come. We just have to survive until it does. How long? Martinez asked. Could be 2 hours, Maria said. Could be 6, could be tomorrow. Nobody liked that answer, but nobody argued either. They reached the training facility without encountering any enemies. The building was eerily quiet. Doors hung open. Equipment was scattered everywhere. As if people had fled in a panic, which they probably had. The supply room was locked. Maria shot the lock off with her pistol, the sound echoing through the empty corridors. Inside, she found what she needed: rifles, ammunition, grenades, basic body armor. She distributed the weapons to those who would take them. Martinez got a rifle and 4 magazines. The medic got a pistol and a vest. Others took what they could carry. Some refused to touch the weapons at all, too scared or too principled. Maria did not force them. A scared person with a gun was more dangerous than an unarmed person who knew their limits. As they geared up, Maria heard a sound, faint, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. A voice, someone calling for help. Stay here, she told the group. Keep quiet, I will check it out. She moved through the training facility alone, following the sound. It led her to a classroom where soldiers normally studied tactics. The room had been torn apart, desks overturned, windows shattered, and in the corner, trapped under a collapsed section of ceiling, was a soldier. He was older, maybe 50. His name tag said Rivera. One leg was pinned under concrete and twisted at a bad angle. His face was gray with pain, and blood soaked through his uniform from multiple wounds. Please, he gasped when he saw her. Please do not leave me. Maria knelt beside him, assessing the injuries. The leg was bad, but it was the blood loss that would kill him. A piece of shrapnel had gone through his side, just above the hip. She could see it sticking out. I am going to get you out, she said, but it will hurt. Everything already hurts, Rivera said with a weak laugh. Do what you have to do. Maria called for the medic. Together, they worked to free Rivera from the debris. When they pulled him out, he screamed once, then passed out from the pain. The medic worked fast, packing the wounds, starting an IV from supplies she carried. He needs a hospital, the medic said, soon or he dies. Then we get him to a hospital, Maria said. She looked at Rivera's unconscious face. She did not know this man, had probably served him food 1,000 times without ever really seeing him. But he was her responsibility now. They all were. She heard gunfire, close, too close, coming from the direction they had just come from. The enemy had found them. Maria moved fast. She grabbed Rivera under the arms, pulling him toward the classroom door. Martinez appeared beside her, taking the wounded soldier's legs. Together, they carried him back to where the group waited. The gunfire was getting closer. Multiple weapons. The sharp crack of AK-47s mixed with the deeper sound of something heavier. A machine gun, maybe. The attackers were sweeping the building systematically, room by room. "We need to go," Vasquez said, her voice high with panic. "We need to go right now." Maria's mind raced. The training facility had multiple exits, but most led to open ground where they would be exposed. There was a basement level, storage rooms and maintenance tunnels, but going down meant trapping themselves again. Then she remembered something. The old drainage system. When the base was first built, they had installed underground pipes to channel rainwater away from the buildings. Over the years, the system had been expanded, connecting most of the major structures. The tunnels were narrow and dark, but they would provide cover. "This way," Maria said, leading them down a stairwell at the back of the building. The basement was dark, emergency lights casting everything in a red glow. The air smelled like mold and old concrete. She found the drainage access panel behind a stack of supplies. It took both her and Martinez to pry it open. The opening was small, barely 3 feet wide. The tunnel beyond disappeared into darkness. "You cannot be serious," someone said. "I am very serious," Maria replied. "This tunnel connects to the medical building. From there we can reach the motor pool. It is our best chance." "I am not going down there," a clerk said, backing away. "I cannot, I am claustrophobic." "Then stay here and die," Maria said bluntly, "because they are coming." As if to punctuate her words, they heard boots thundering down the stairs above them, voices shouting in that foreign language. The attackers had entered the basement level. The clerk went into the tunnel. They all did, because fear of tight spaces was nothing compared to fear of death. Maria went last, pulling the access panel closed behind her. The tunnel was worse than she remembered. Cold water ran along the bottom, about ankle deep. The ceiling was so low they had to crouch and sometimes crawl. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the small flashlights some of them carried. They moved in single file, Martinez in the lead with the wounded Rivera slung between him and another man. The medic came behind them, then the others, with Maria bringing up the rear. Every sound echoed strangely in the confined space. Breathing, splashing, the occasional whimper of fear. Behind them, Maria heard the access panel being torn open. Light spilled into the tunnel. Voices echoed. The attackers had found their escape route. "Move faster," Maria urged the group. "They are coming." But they could not move much faster. The tunnel was too narrow, too low. They stumbled over debris, slipped on the wet concrete. Rivera groaned with every jostle, only semi-conscious. Maria turned back, raising her rifle. In the narrow tunnel, she had the advantage. The attackers would have to come at her one at a time, in single file, with nowhere to take cover. It was a fatal funnel, a kill zone. The first attacker's flashlight beam swept around the corner. Maria waited, controlling her breathing. Slow, steady, like she had been taught decades ago, like she had done in other tunnels, in other wars, in another lifetime. The attacker came around the corner, rifle first. Maria fired 3 quick shots. The muzzle flash lit up the tunnel like lightning. The man fell, blocking the passage behind him. More voices, angry now, frustrated, but they did not come forward. They were smart enough to recognize a trap. Maria heard them retreating, planning, looking for another way around maybe, or getting something to flush the tunnel. Grenades would be devastating in this confined space. Keep moving, she called forward to the group. Do not stop. They crawled forward for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. The tunnel branched several times and Maria had to trust her memory to navigate. Left at the first junction, straight through the second, right at the third. Finally, they reached another access panel. Martinez pushed it open, and blessed fresh air flooded in. They climbed out one by one, emerging in the basement of the medical building. The building was abandoned. Supplies were scattered everywhere, as if the medical staff had fled in a hurry. Blood stained the floors. Bandages and equipment lay trampled and broken. But it was quiet. No gunfire, no voices. For a moment they just stood there breathing hard, trying to process that they were still alive. We need to keep moving, Maria said. The motor pool is not far. She led them up to the ground floor, moving carefully, checking each room before they passed. The medical building had large windows, and through them, Maria could see the base in daylight for the first time since the attack started. It was devastation. Buildings burned, sending black smoke into the sky. Vehicles sat destroyed and twisted. Bodies lay everywhere. The fence on the east side had been blown open, creating a massive gap. Through that gap, Maria could see more attackers outside, setting up what looked like a mortar position. How many of them are there? Rosa whispered, her face pressed against the window beside Maria. Too many, Maria said quietly. But she also saw something that gave her hope. Near the command center, she could see friendly soldiers. A small group, maybe 15 men, firing from behind barricades. They were outnumbered and surrounded, but they were still fighting. We need to link up with them, Maria said. Combine our forces. We have a better chance together than separate. How do we get there without getting killed? Vasquez asked. Maria studied the layout. The open ground between the medical building and the command center was a death trap. But there was a covered walkway that connected to the administrative building, and from there, a series of smaller structures that would provide concealment most of the way. Follow me, she said, and stay low. They moved out using every bit of cover available. Maria felt exposed, vulnerable. In the tunnels, she had felt in control. Out here in the open, there were too many variables, too many places an enemy could be hiding. They made it to the administrative building without incident, then to a storage shed, then to a damaged vehicle that provided cover for the next sprint. They were halfway to the command center when the mortar fire started. The first shell hit 50 yards away, throwing up a geyser of dirt and debris. The second was closer. The third closer still. The attackers had spotted them. Run, Maria shouted. The group scattered, running for the command center in a panic. Maria stayed at the back, providing covering fire at targets she could barely see. She dropped one attacker who emerged from behind a building, suppressed another who was setting up a machine gun. Martinez reached the command center first, the other soldiers there pulling him inside. One by one, the group made it to safety. Rosa, the medic, Vasquez, the others. A mortar shell hit right where they had been standing seconds before. The blast wave knocked Maria forward, slamming her into the concrete wall of the command center. Her ears rang. Blood ran down the side of her face from where something had cut her scalp. Hands grabbed her, pulling her inside. The steel door slammed shut behind her. She was inside the command center, safe for the moment. She looked around at the faces staring at her. Some she recognized, most she did not. And then she saw him, standing by the window, rifle in hand, his face grimy with smoke and exhaustion. Sergeant Torres. He stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. Maria, he said, his voice disbelieving. What are you doing here? I thought you were just a Euros. Just the cook, Maria finished for him. She smiled, tasting blood on her lips. I get that a lot. Torres looked at the rifle in her hands, at the way she held it, at the bodies of the people she had brought safely through hell, and understanding dawned on his face. You were military, he said, Before, you never mentioned it. You never asked, Maria said. A young officer, a lieutenant whose name tag said Rays, pushed forward. What is the situation out there? He demanded. How many civilians did you bring? Are any of them armed? I brought 12 people, Maria reported crisply, falling back into the language of military briefings without thinking. 3 are wounded, 1 seriously. 6 are armed and have basic combat capability. The others are non-combatants. We encountered enemy forces multiple times, engaged and neutralized at least 8 hostiles. Enemy strength is estimated at battalion level, with heavy weapons and coordinated tactics. Ray stared at her, then looked at Tors. Who is this woman? This, Tors said slowly, is someone we should have been paying more attention to. Maria looked around the command center. 15 soldiers now plus her group, against how many attackers? 100, 200. The math was not good. But they were still alive, still fighting, and as long as they were fighting, there was hope. She checked her rifle, counted her ammunition. 3 magazines left, not enough, but it would have to do. What is the plan? She asked Rays. The young lieutenant looked lost, overwhelmed. We are holding position, he said weakly, waiting for reinforcement. How long until reinforcements arrive? They said 4 hours, maybe 6. Communication is spotty. Maria looked out the window at the enemy forces regrouping, bringing up more weapons, preparing for another assault. 4 hours might as well have been 4 days. Then we need to make every minute count, she said. And for the first time since the attack began, she let herself feel it. Not fear, not panic, but something older, something that had been sleeping inside her for 30 years. The warrior, the soldier, the fighter who had never really gone away. She was ready. The next assault came 20 minutes later, and it was brutal. The attackers hit from 3 sides simultaneously, pouring fire into the command center from every angle. Windows shattered. Bullets punched through the walls. The noise was deafening, a continuous roar that made it impossible to think. Maria took position at the east window, firing in controlled bursts. Next to her, Tors did the same, their movements falling into an unspoken rhythm. Fire, duck, reload, fire again, like a dance they had both learned in different wars but never forgotten. Contact right, someone shouted. Maria swung her rifle, dropping an attacker who was trying to flank their position. The man fell and 2 more took his place, running low and fast. She hit one, Tors got the other, but there were always more, always. We are running low on ammunition, Martinez called from the north window. His face was black with powder residue, his eyes wide with the intensity of combat. Maria made a quick decision. Vasquez, check the armory in the back room. Anything you can find, go now. For once, Vasquez did not argue. She ran, keeping low, disappearing into the back of the building. The medic worked frantically in the corner, trying to keep up with the wounded. 2 more soldiers had been hit in this assault. One had taken a round through the shoulder. The other had shrapnel in his legs from a grenade that had made it through a window. Rivera, the soldier they had rescued from the training facility, was still unconscious, his breathing shallow. The attackers pulled back briefly, regrouping. In the momentary lull, Maria assessed their situation. It was not good. They had lost 2 more defenders to wounds serious enough to take them out of the fight. Ammunition was running critically low. The building was taking serious structural damage from the heavy weapons fire. 1 more sustained assault might collapse the whole thing. Ray sat on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at nothing. The young lieutenant had frozen up completely after the first attack, overwhelmed by the violence and responsibility. Tors had quietly taken over command, and nobody had questioned it. We cannot hold here much longer, Tors said quietly to Maria. They are going to overrun us. Maria nodded. She had reached the same conclusion. Then we need to change the equation. How? We go on the offensive, Maria said. Hit them where they do not expect it. Tors looked at her like she was crazy. We are outnumbered 10-1. Which is why they will not expect it, Maria said. They think we are trapped here waiting to die. They are getting confident, careless. We use that. She pointed out the window at the mortar position she had spotted earlier. That mortar is tearing us apart. It is also their heaviest weapon. If we can take it out, we remove their biggest advantage. How many people do you need? 2, Maria said. Me and Martinez. You will die out there. Maybe, Maria said, but we will definitely die in here if we do nothing. Tors was quiet for a moment, weighing the odds. Then he nodded. I will create a distraction, give you cover, but make it fast. Vasquez returned with an armful of weapons and ammunition. Not much, but enough. Maria took extra magazines, checked her rifle one more time, and looked at Martinez. You do not have to come, she told him. This is volunteer only. Martinez swallowed hard. His hands were shaking, but he nodded. I am with you. They waited for Tor's signal. When it came, it was loud and violent. Tors and the other soldiers opened up with everything they had, pouring fire into the enemy positions on the north and west sides. The attackers focused their attention there, returning fire, thinking this was a last desperate stand. Maria and Martinez slipped out the back door. They moved fast and low, using the smoke and chaos as cover. The mortar position was 200 yards away, behind what used to be the motor pool. 4 men operated it, protected by sandbags and 2 guards. Maria and Martinez covered the distance in short sprints, using destroyed vehicles and rubble for concealment. When they were 30 yards away, Maria signaled Martinez to stop. On my mark, she whispered, take the 2 guards, I will handle the mortar crew. Martinez's hands were still shaking, but he raised his rifle and nodded. Mark. They opened fire simultaneously. Maria's first 3 shots dropped 2 of the mortar crew. Her next burst got the 3rd. Martinez hit 1 guard, missed the 2nd. The surviving guard spun toward them, bringing his rifle up. Maria put 2 rounds in his chest before he could fire. They ran forward. The mortar sat there, still loaded, ready to fire. Maria did not know much about mortars, but she knew how to make things explode. She pulled a grenade from her belt, pulled the pin, and dropped it down the mortar tube. Run, she shouted. They sprinted away from the position. Behind them, the grenade detonated inside the mortar, triggering the loaded shell. The combined explosion was massive, a fireball that shot 50 feet into the air and sent shrapnel spinning in every direction. Maria and Martinez threw themselves behind a wrecked truck as debris rained down around them. When the smoke cleared, the mortar position was gone, just a crater and twisted metal. But the explosion had drawn attention. Attackers were converging on their position from multiple directions, at least 20 of them. Back to the command center, Maria said. Move. They ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around their feet. Something hot grazed Maria's arm, drawing blood but not slowing her down. Martinez stumbled, caught himself, kept running. They were not going to make it. Too many enemies. Too much open ground. Maria's mind raced, looking for options, for any way to survive the next 30 seconds. Then she heard it, a sound so beautiful she almost cried. Helicopters. 3 of them coming in fast and low from the south. Military attack helicopters, their door guns already spinning up. Behind them, she could see transport helicopters carrying troops. The reinforcements had arrived. The helicopters opened fire on the attackers, their heavy machine guns tearing through the enemy positions like paper. The attackers scattered, their coordinated assault falling apart into chaos and panic. Maria and Martinez made it back to the command center. Tors pulled them inside, grinning through the grime and exhaustion on his face. You did it, he said. You crazy woman, you actually did it. Outside, the helicopters landed. Fresh troops poured out, heavily armed and organized. Within minutes, they had secured the perimeter. Within an hour, they had pushed the attackers completely out of the base. The battle was over. Maria sat on the floor of the command center, her back against the wall, rifle across her lap. She was covered in blood and dirt and smoke. Her body ached. Her ears still rang from the gunfire, but she was alive. They were all alive. The people she had led through the tunnels, the soldiers she had fought beside, they had survived. Medics arrived, triaging the wounded, loading Rivera and the others onto helicopters for evacuation. Officers moved through the wreckage, taking statements, trying to piece together what had happened. A colonel found Maria sitting there. He looked at her name tag, at the rifle in her hands, at the bodies of the enemies she had killed visible through the shattered windows. "You are the cook?" he asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "I am the cook," Maria confirmed. "I am told you saved over 30 people today, led them through enemy fire, took out a mortar position, fought like a veteran soldier." Maria said nothing. What was there to say? "Where did you learn to fight like that?" the colonel asked. "Special operations," Maria said quietly. 30 years ago, another war, another lifetime." "Why did you never mention this when you applied to work here?" Maria looked up at him. "Because nobody asked, and because it did not matter, I was just the cook." The colonel shook his head slowly. "You were never just anything." Later, after the base had been secured and the dead had been counted and the wounded had been evacuated, they found the full story. The attack had been carried out by a well-organized insurgent group, over 200 strong. They had intended to capture the base, steal weapons and vehicles, and use it as a propaganda victory. They had killed 38 soldiers and wounded dozens more, but they had failed to take the base. Failed because a small group of defenders, led by a cook who was not really a cook, had held the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The news spread fast. Within days, reporters arrived wanting to tell Maria's story. The woman who had been invisible for 7 years was suddenly famous. Her picture was in newspapers. Her name was on the news. The base commander offered her a position training new recruits. The colonel wanted her to return to active duty. A dozen different opportunities presented themselves, each one trying to make up for the 7 years of disrespect and dismissal. Maria turned them all down. She went back to the kitchen, back to stirring pots and serving food and doing the work that nobody noticed. But things were different now. When she served food, soldiers looked at her, really looked at her. They said thank you and they meant it. The young recruits whispered to each other when she walked past, pointing her out with something like awe in their voices. Rosa asked her once why she came back, why she did not take one of the offers, why she chose to remain a cook when she could have been so much more. Maria thought about it for a long time before answering. "I am not a cook because I have to be," she finally said. "I am a cook because I choose to be. There is honor in feeding people, in doing simple work well, in being useful without needing recognition." "But you are a hero," Rosa said. "No," Maria said gently. "I am just a woman who did what needed to be done, and then came back to do what I love. There is no shame in that." Martinez came by the kitchen sometimes, always polite, always respectful. He had been promoted to corporal after the battle. He said it was because of what he learned from Maria. How to be brave even when terrified. How to do the right thing even when it seemed impossible. Torres visited too, before he was transferred to a new assignment. He sat in the mess hall after hours, drinking coffee, talking with Maria like they were old friends. "You know," he said one night, "I always knew there was something different about you, something that did not fit. I just could not figure out what it was." "And now you know," Maria said. "Now I know," Torres agreed. He was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it, coming back here, being just the cook again?" Maria smiled. "I am not just the cook," she said. "I never was. I was always more than that. I just needed to remind myself." She looked around the kitchen, at the pots and pans hanging on the walls, at the familiar spaces she had worked in for 7 years. This was her kingdom, her place, not because it was all she could do, but because it was what she chose to do. Besides, she added, someone has to make sure you all eat properly, and I am very good at what I do. Tors laughed at that. Yes, he said, yes, you are. Years later, when they built a memorial for those who died defending the base, they included Maria's name on it, not as a cook, but as a defender, a soldier, a hero. Maria went to the unveiling ceremony. She stood with the other survivors, listening to the speeches, watching as they pulled the cloth away from the stone monument. And when it was over, she went back to the kitchen. She tied on her apron. She turned on the stoves. She began preparing the evening meal for 300 soldiers who would eat her food and now finally see the person who made it. She was Maria, she was a cook, she was a soldier, she was a survivor. She was everything she needed to be, and nothing she did not. And she had never been invisible at all. People had just been looking at her wrong. Now they knew better. Now they understood that heroism does not always wear a uniform. That strength comes in many forms, that the person serving your food might also be the person who would die to protect you. They laughed at her once, called her just a cook, dismissed her as nobody important. They would never make that mistake again.